We want to get our money. We want to make that green. So let's start off with Shakur Stevenson versus Shuichiro Yoshino for the WBC lightweight eliminator. So the winner will become the mandatory for the WBC belt. So either Devin Haney or Lomachenko. So this is actually a pretty big fight. Shakur Stevenson a minus 1600. Yoshino is a plus 830. Bryan, who do you have winning this fight and how?
Worth noting that as we touched on in our Devin Haney Vasily Lomachenko preview from last week, Bob Arum says that the plan is for Shakur Stevenson to fight Lomachenko after. He didn't really say the plan is to fight against Devin Haney after for Lomachenko because he thinks Devin Haney might move up to 140 if he beats Lomachenko. And right now, we're both leaning that way that he beats Lomachenko. But I would love to see Shakur Stevenson fight against the winner of that fight. But before that, he has to beat Yoshino. And Yoshino's good. Like, he beat Nakatani in his last fight, and he stopped him. Like, he knocked him out in the 6th round. Nakatani, if you guys remember, most famous for losing to Teofimo Lopez in a spirited effort by decision. Also getting stopped by Vasily Lomachenko in the 9th round. In between that, stopped Felix Verdejo, who is now in jail. And, the biggest win of his career against I don't even know if he was a rising star at that point, but definitely somebody who was probably on the verge of fighting for a title prior to that. So I think Yoshino is really, really an interesting fighter, but I sort of, when this was announced, I felt like Shakur Stevenson was going to win by decision. The books also back that up. He's minus 220 to win on points. That's sort of how I've been leaning. And it's like the value is not great, but it's also like that's probably what's going to happen. To my knowledge, Yoshino, I'm not sure if he's been down in his career, but he has taken some shots, got into some wars, but this isn't going to be a war. He'll try to make it one because that's what he should do against Shakur Stevenson, but I don't think he's going to be successful in doing that. I think Shakur Stevenson's just going to pick him off, win, from the outside, even though he doesn't have the reach advantage here. It's about the same, but he's just so good at getting inside and outside, and being able to establish his jab early is something he's going to do. He's going to win with that straight right hand also. From that straight left hand rather from that southpaw position. And yeah, ultimately, I think he's just going to box his way to a wide decision victory and get around those looping shots that Yoshino tends to display, and ultimately win minus 220 decision. Sorry, that's kind of where I'm leaning, even though I know the value there isn't great. That's kind of what's going to happen in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean later on we can talk about putting together a parlay because I think there's 3 guys that are for sure gonna win. Maybe one upset actually. We'll get into that a little bit later. But Yoshino, he's also the Oriental and Pacific Boxing Federation lightweight champion,
Yep.
the Pacific Asia light as well. That's massive in Japan, also over, around Asia. So he's no slouch. So this is actually a true test for Shakur as well. He has power. I think his best punch is his right hand. That's where he possesses that nasty power. And yeah, he recently KO'd Nakatani. And you mentioned Nakatani. He fought Teofimo Lopez pretty well. He
Yeah.
fought him pretty tight. He also fought Lomachenko. So, Nakatani's been in the ring with some good dudes. As for Yoshino, he also has a really good jab from what I've noticed. And I went back and tried to catch some of his fights to learn a little bit more about him. He starts off the rounds really slow. And that's where I think Shakur Stevenson is going to outbox him because he doesn't start off really fast. And then what he does is he tries to, cut off the ring and tries to be a little bit more aggressive and land combos. And then boom, he hits you with that right. And that's usually where he gets his opponents. You know what I mean? So I think this one is actually going to be a pretty entertaining fight. So as for Shakur Stevenson, it's kind of a really interesting story to how he got here because he was supposed to fight Isaac Cruz. That fight was mandated to Shakur.
By the
But
WBC.
yes,
Yeah.
that didn't happen. Then he was supposed to fight William Zepeda, and Oscar De La Hoya shut that down, said, he wasn't ready. Then he was supposed to fight George Kambosos Jr., and he wanted to take some time off after, obviously, the 2 fights against Devin Haney. And that's understandable. Like,
Yeah.
he can do that. Also, he made, like, a ton of money. So he's chilling right now in Australia.
And if you're trying to get wins on your record after those 2 losses, you don't start as Shakur Stevenson.
Yeah, that would be 3 losses in a row for sure for George Kambosos Jr. But Yoshino, this is actually going to be a pretty good test for Shakur because he's also bigger, and this is Shakur moving up in a weight class as well. We know how good Shakur is defensively. Sometimes that shoulder roll reminds me a little bit of Money Mayweather as well. He is very skilled, high IQ, great body puncher. I think he's going to get to the body as well of Yoshino's. Sometimes he leaves himself exposed as well. Also, really good at getting through the guard. And I think Yoshino's going to throw up the high guard, and Shakur is going to be able to get through that. But I think this is a big fight for Shakur Stevenson because he's actually making his debut in this weight class. And it's going to
Yeah.
be important to see how he fights the bigger guy. Do I think he gets the knockout? I think there's a possibility that he's going to beat up on Yoshino early on because Yoshino likes to start off really slow. But I think Shakur is going to be Shakur Stevenson. He's going to, use his tactics really well. He's going to figure out his opponent, and then he's going to dominate, and he's going to win those early rounds. So I have Shakur Stevenson winning by unanimous decision on FanDuel. It's a minus 220. I know there's not lots of value here, but if you don't want to lose money, you want to make smart bets. So I think
Yeah.
Shakur by unanimous decision is a smart bet at minus 220.
However, I think there's a sprinkle worth mentioning. Shakur Stevenson, if he's going to stop Yoshino, I think it's going to be late. I think it's going to be in that group round betting rounds 9 through 12, which we've highlighted at different points, group round betting. I think if he does win, he gets that stoppage between rounds 9 and 12, kind of like he did to Jamel Herring.
Mm-hmm.
And that is plus 700. So yeah, most of my money, not most of my money, but like of the money that I'm going to use to bet on this fight, yes, the decision is where I'm leaning and what I'm going to ultimately do. The sprinkle is going on that plus 700 for Shakur Stevenson to get the stoppage late just to recoup. Because I mean, plus 700 odds at the potential of that happening. Yoshino's obviously, he's never been stopped because he never lost. But if Shakur Stevenson picks him apart in that way, I thought against Conceição, he could have gotten a stoppage, but they didn't. And they ended up leaving him, letting him go through the latter portion of that fight. But Shakur Stevenson is somebody, if he stops you, it's going to be late and it's going to be an accumulation of punishment. And I think we could see that. So I think that's worth the sprinkle, even though ultimately I do think this goes to the cards.
Yeah, but at the mandatory, we want to know how you're betting this fight with Shakur Stevenson and Yoshino. Let us know. Drop some comments below if you're watching us on YouTube. Also, you can hit us up on our social media channels at TheMandatory TKO, Twitter, TikTok, and IG as well. All right.